The internet turned the whole world into a small village. If something bad happens to someone, everyone knows about it.
Today, we have Mohammad Al-Khalili with us. He leads the company ClearGrid based out of the Dubai and UAE region. I'd love to understand a lot more about the journey as we go along.
When we decided to build this, we said, what would it look like to solve for the problem of debt collection in 2023? Our goal is to replace the traditional aggressive collection practice with something more intelligent. So we're handling a portfolio of over $300 million in almost a year. What sets us aside when it comes to that, though, is that we would be willing to go after smaller amounts that usually a traditional debt collection agency wouldn't go after. What we realized is that for you to truly be able to disrupt this industry is actually to not only solve for the lender, but to solve for the borrower.
What Mohammad and team have done really is to make this a lot more empathetic. And how is it empathetic? Because it's a bunch of growth marketers who understand funnels and friction and all of those issues while trying to solve for collections.
I look at CSAT very seriously. I don't only want to know that people paid, but I want to know that they were treated right. We understand more than ever that people go through things. They're not just inherently bad. And that changes the entire conversation. That's actually what I would say the main IP is, which is understanding what to say to whom and when and where and how often. You can't treat someone who missed payment for 2 days the same way you would treat someone who missed it for 2 years.
It's a very fascinating journey how they've translated these into a bunch of automated flows, derived attributes, user scores, reasons why people are not paying up.
So far it's been positive. Our CSAT has been at 4.5. If someone is saying, hey, I lost my job, I have no money, there is no attributes in the world that's going to predict that this person is going to be able to pay me anything this month. The toughest part in it is to understand what correlates and what doesn't. Because we can always, based on assumptions, create the fanciest journeys. But what is the impact really? What's the ROI? You wouldn't want to call someone at a time where they could potentially answer the call and at the same time tell you, call me back later. If I have tried to say, okay, I want to use the AI agents to replace completely the human agents, it wouldn't have ever succeeded. The way we had to think about it is how do channels hand over to each other at the right point in time to build a dialogue, not just a conversation.
Let's get rolling.
Hi, this is Ankur. I'm your host for the conversation today on the State of Traditional Marketing podcast. Today's guest is a guy called Mohammad. He runs a company called ClearGrid. Now, you might imagine what this is about, but ClearGrid is in space of technology-led collections as a business. Collections as a subject of money that you've lent to people, then you want to bring it back. It could be considered a pretty complicated, human-driven, people knocking on doors to seek money kind of business. But what Mohammad and team have done really is to make this a lot more empathetic. So very fascinating conversation. Have a listen.
Thank you so much for doing this, Mohammad. Great to have you in the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I was looking for the build-up of your journey in terms of your last few years at work. How did you end up at ClearGrid?
So I started my career pretty much as a growth hacker. So retention marketing was one of my biggest KPIs. Started it off at we're doing it for an HRMS and recruitment website. From there, I felt like I wanted to do something else a bit more. Moved to Dubai with 10,000 dirhams at the time, $2,000 approximately. No plans, nothing. I don't know what I'm doing. Started a few things here and there, but mostly an e-commerce product and the Growth Magnet, which is a growth marketing agency. And that's where I really started to get exposed to everything on acquisition, activation, retention, referral, all of the entire growth funnel. Helped a lot of startups grow and scale and got exposed to a lot. And then throughout that journey, I've met who's my co-founder now, but I started working with him at some point at Munshawn. I met Mohammed back in 2017, I guess, and he was telling me about what he was building at Munshawn. I was like, okay, I want to be a part of this. So we started this food delivery app, and in 2021 got acquired by Careem/Uber. I started to serve as the regional head of growth for LiveSpace in their move to Saudi Arabia. And that happened around the same time they were acquiring Canvas. So I also started, I was basically the market launcher and GM for Canvas. Now, with that, the entrepreneurial spirit was still there. I felt like I wanted to do something different, and I noticed, like I was talking to my co-founder now, Mohammad Zabin, and we saw that there is a pattern in lending. Like everyone is lending, but no one is building the infrastructure around it. Okay, so what happens when someone does not pay, right? And how do you go about it? And if you're lending someone on a very digital journey, how do you collect from them, right? Um, and when we started to look at it, we've noticed that the debt collection space is huge. It's valued at around $500 billion just in the region, right? So, and with that, we saw a big opportunity, not to only digitize it, but to take a step back and to ask ourselves, if we were to build a debt solution overall, right, in 2023 at the time, what would that look like, right? Um, and you'd be surprised that we didn't find that anyone have tried to answer that in the last years, right? Like debt collection is one of the oldest industries in the region. I think debt collection as a
Sure.
practice started pretty much since tax was invented, and there were like tax collectors knocking on doors,
Sure.
right? And it evolved very quickly. Like the lending evolved very quickly, but still, the only thing that we would have seen in the last like few hundred years is a move from a physical knocking on the door to a telephone, when in reality the customer exists on email, on their phone. There's an SMS, there's WhatsApp, right? And voice changed and evolved a lot since the inception of AI.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that's really when ClearGrid came about, and we started.
I get the journey. Maybe a good idea to now help us understand what is ClearGrid, what do you really do, who do you solve for, and what is the real problem you're trying to address?
Right. So we started ClearGrid, as I mentioned, with that like bold vision to transform debt collection across the
Collections.
Middle East
Mhm.
and North Africa. We provide an advanced AI driven solution designed to modernize the debt collection process, moving away completely from the outdated manual methods towards something a bit more efficient, automated, and empathetic towards
Mhm.
customers. Our goal is to replace the traditional aggressive collection practice with something more intelligent, more compassionate,
Mhm.
and an approach that significantly improves the journey of both the lender and the borrower altogether.
And when you solve for a lender, what kind of KPIs and metrics are being addressed?
Two, three main ones. They're all related to each other. So number one is like the amount collected, right? Collection rates and the speed to collections, right? So I would say those are the main metrics that we'd be looking at.
The speed to collection you also said was important. And in terms of your role in the game, typically when a loan is issued to the time it's due for collection, there is, let's say, a certain time window. Do you start pretty much right after the loan is issued, or how does your role start to play out? Or do people come
Yeah.
to you after they've done whatever they had to do, and now it's only the hard delinquent players who need to be collected from?
Exactly. We work predominantly with non-performing loans or NPLs, right? Which
Okay.
is basically once the person have stopped paying or did not pay, right? Now,
Hmm.
here it depends on a lender to lender and the type of institution as well, right? So,
Sure.
I mean, we work with the entire stack from BMPLs to banks
Hmm.
to even
Hmm.
SMEs, right? Such as car rental, etc.
Sure.
And usually, but generally, typically, what happens is that the lender themselves they give it a shot internally for 30 days, anywhere
Hmm.
between 15 to 30 days, and after that, they would give those delinquent accounts to a third party or a
Right.
debt collection agency, and that's basically when we receive them.
So you're in effect replacing a whole bunch of those, in some sense, informal, unorganized collection agencies who would probably do this whole knocking on the door or maybe aggressive phone calls as a route to make collections happen.
Exactly. We don't replace them. We are one of them, right? So we are
Sure. I mean, yeah,
technically,
you compete with them,
yeah, exactly. But we just decided to do the whole thing very differently, right?
which is the
Whereby,
part I'd love to double click. I understand you use AI as a term here, and you're building a company with technology. So let's just understand what would a typical journey of a customer, or rather, in this case, the borrower, how would that look like from the day that you get involved?
right. So as soon as we receive the borrower, we first start by engaging with them. We do it. We engage with them on an omni-channel basis. So we start by sending an SMS, an email. We do the AI calls, and in addition to that, in case those failed, we also do a human call just to double check. And if approved, we also do WhatsApp. So once we started, we with that we understand which channels this person like to be engaged on. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
they don't happen at the same time; they happen in a step
Sure.
format, right? Where we first start with an email,
Yeah.
then an SMS, etc. Um, and once we understand what are the reachable and non-reachable channels, we start to engage more on the reachable channels. We try not to pressure the customer into speaking on a channel that they're not usually or typically comfortable with,
Sure.
as we obviously understand it's a sensitive topic. So if they prefer to
Yeah.
do it on WhatsApp, they don't want to speak to us, that's completely fine.
Of course. Yeah.
So yeah, and then there we start to understand what is the reason behind the delinquency, and we start to educate and to explain to them, one, what does this mean, and what the stage that you're at mean, what probably
Mm-hmm.
have happened, and what are the potential consequences of not doing it. And we try to gather
Hmm.
some data such as the reason behind the non-payment, etc. And that's where we start to offer some solutions. um, Obviously the customer is free to again speak to us or completely resolve without speaking to a single person, right? So we
Sure.
have a portal as well that each and every communication takes them to, and there they can see their entire options. Now,
Hmm.
if they needed something a bit more customized because they're going through something in their lives, they can reach out to us at any point in time, and then we go back to the lender and we start to negotiate on their behalf to say, like, okay,
Okay.
this person has gone through this financial challenge. There is no way they're going to be able to pay this in one installment. Let's make this over more installments. Or
Hmm.
this person probably needs something like a discount, or they need to just simply wait till their next salary, and that's when they would be able to pay. But like, let's pause any potential action for now,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And
Okay.
then the second most important part of the journey is taking those promises and taking all of those things and translating them into action. And
Hmm.
thanks to technology, we're able to do that a bit more. Meaning, if someone promised to pay on their salary date, then easy. They can do that via the portal by adding their card, and we will
Yeah.
automatically take the payment on their salary day. If someone wants to start an installment plan, instead of having to remind them every month that they need to make the payment, they can just simply also do it via our portal, and that payment would be deducted automatically via
Okay.
us. Or if they want to set up a direct debit via us, they can also do
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. Hmm. So, step one, I was trying to understand if the whole cost of running this collection is also a topic, while I understand the total value collected is a bigger driver. But does cost end up being an answer to the competitive space, because the brand or the lender might have more people or more agencies who could do this for them, and they would choose you because you can collect more, or you'll do it at a lesser cost, or what are the dimensions?
Right. So for us, it's as I mentioned, it's about the performance, not about the
Hmm.
cost. We do
Okay.
offer, like, in terms of our price or our commission, it ranges anywhere between 10% all the way to 65%. So it's not
Okay.
really about that.
Hmm.
What sets us aside when it comes to that, though, is that we would be willing to go after smaller amounts that usually a traditional debt collection agency wouldn't go after.
Got it.
Meaning, like, usually, rarely that like traditional debt collection agencies would
Hmm.
accept values of $10 a ticket, right?
Sure.
Meanwhile, for us, we would be able to do that pretty much effectively when it comes to cost and efficiency, where technology really helps. Now, on the empathy
Yeah.
side,
Get it. Hmm.
That is a big part of our ethos, because again, like when we decided to build this, we said, what would it look like to build to solve for the problem of debt collection in
Yeah.
2023, right?
Hmm.
So when you look at it at that point in time versus any other time, you have so many other layers, right? Um, I mean, we as humans first evolved, right? And we understand that more than ever that people go through things, they're not just inherently bad.
Yeah.
And that changes the entire conversation. What we realized is that for you to truly to be able to disrupt this agency, this industry, sorry, is actually
Hmm.
to not only solve for the lender but to solve for the borrower. And the only way you
Of
can solve
course.
for the borrower is by bringing them to the table, and for that you would need empathy. So it's a business decision first, right?
Understood.
But second, also the world is steering more towards regulation. Like for example,
Hmm.
maybe what was possible 20 years ago is not possible now. So in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and all of the markets we're looking at, um, for example, a site visit or physical visit is no longer allowed in debt collection,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
That's an entire channel, if you think about it, that
Hmm.
was that was out, right? Even when it comes to phone calls, there is a move towards limiting the number of phone calls. How many times can you call someone, right? So the regulators are also are becoming more pro that approach,
Okay.
and the brands themselves, right,
Hmm.
would need to do that, because brands now, like, the internet became like turned the whole world into a small village, right? If
Sure.
something bad happens to someone, everyone knows about it, and the brand would want to
Hmm.
protect its image. So the last
Sure.
thing they would want is to say, hey, we've got you when we've given you the credit card or the loan, and then suddenly when you have gone through an issue, the whole world is turning against you, right? So I think that's where things come together
Hmm.
nicely for us to build this.
So, being more sensitive and empathetic is good for law and good for brands, which is why more people are inclined towards a solution that is more deterministic in some sense, because whatever you do, your entire system is above board and largely intentional designed at a system level. It's not a human judgment on the part of a collections executive to change the scale of aggression that he wants to apply to a specific case.
Precisely that. And even when we use humans, we've created some amazing technology to be able to
Hmm.
understand what's happening in the interaction. So every call is
Okay.
not only recorded and just that, but
Hmm.
also every call is recorded, transcribed, and there are like certain flags that would basically where AI magic comes in and would say things like, this call was too aggressive, right? Or this call was great.
Hmm.
Do more calls like
Hmm.
that. You should have said this instead of that. And
Okay.
that would happen live while the agent is speaking. So as the agent is
Hmm.
speaking, the AI is generating, and it's actually notifying their manager in case anything has went wrong. And that was our
Okay.
way to disrupt for this, or to
Hmm.
solve for this problem.
Fascinating. So, help us understand a bit of your technology stack in terms of what are the different components that you've built already yourself. I'm assuming you have some external systems that also plug with your core, maybe a CRM, maybe a marketing automation, maybe something. It doesn't matter the whole choice of brands you're using as much as the architecture as to how you built this whole ecosystem.
Obviously, when it comes to the marketing automation bit, we're with WebEngage. So there's that. That
Sure.
is actually the orchestrator that determines and shows us where to communicate to what, and that's where
Hmm.
basically we send all of our SMSs, emails, etc. Um, and the CRM is something else that we also like had to partially outsource, partially build a lot of
Hmm.
components of it by ourselves. So we've got something
Okay.
that's easily customizable that way. And then, but then everything else we had to build in house, right? All of those AI tools, they had to come in with the team. The when it comes to AI voice to voice, we couldn't rely on the existing tools that exist in the market,
Okay.
simply because
Hmm.
they're mostly built for sales or customer support. Nothing was really built for debt collection.
Okay.
Also, we had to solve for Arabic. which was a big challenge for us. Getting the dialect and the accents right, and being able to speak
Yeah.
in a very like human-like way, um, kind of pushed us. I personally wouldn't have wanted to build anything, right? I wanted to just solve for depths, but these
Yeah.
are like, but we faced some challenges that got us in a place where we're like, okay, we kind of need to develop this component and that component in house. Obviously, we do rely on LLMs. We don't
Yeah.
have
Of
NVIDIA
course.
chips like all over, right?
Of course.
But everything that goes around it and the guardrails, so things like the text to speech, the speech to text, understanding dialects and accents of the customer, to be able to
Right.
transcribe that and then send that to the LLM. And then when the LLM actually produce something, to be able to take that,
Yeah.
right, and to say it and to speak in a way that the customer would understand was a challenge that we had to pretty much fix. Another thing that got us to get there was obviously the on-site deployment bit. So with many of our
Okay.
we're dealing with big data, right? Like what I mean by big data, as in data, very sensitive data, right? So
Yeah.
you can't just simply have it hosted anywhere. And when we're dealing with bank level data, you would want each and every lender to have their own data, not
Yeah.
coinciding with each other. And you don't want the AI to like start to get places. So and it is anyway like a compliance requirement. So we had to build a lot around hosting that as well.
The infrastructure hosting as well. But you mentioned the use of AI in listening conversation and making that part of the puzzle more efficient. Are there any other dimensions where you're using AI? Could be LLMs or could be your own algorithm that you would have evolved, because of late AI is being used a little, loosely around what could have earlier been machine learning or data science as well. How does that look in your world?
The beauty of this day and age and building something today is that you can leverage a lot of tools that would help you
Yeah.
make better and easier decisions, right? But as far as the things that we had to customize or build for ourselves, I would say it's mostly the AI voice to voice
Sure.
part, and then the listening part. Um, yeah, those I would say are the main ones. Everything else is like tools that we've leveraged,
And
like
you've
externally.
integrated them neatly, and they talk to each other nicely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the whole thing around users' reasons to not pay, and as a marketer, that ends up, let's say, seeming like you'll fork the journeys to say that okay, people who have reason X go this path, reason Y go this path, reason Z go this path. It could change the level of intensity, the kind of content, the kind of choice of channels, a lot of those dimensions. Is this usually a very well rule-based relationship, or is there a certain level of constant evolution that seems to happen from a learning context?
It is a constant learning, to be honest, and that's actually what
Mm-hmm.
I would say the main IP is, right? Almost,
Yeah.
which is understanding what to say to whom and when and where, right? And how often. Most of it is actually more onto that journey, understanding first the demographic of who are we talking to, right? And with that, you would have a lot of rebuilt things, right? Such as like the language they likely would speak,
Yeah.
what kind of communication, etc. Then you have like their days of delinquency, etc.
Yeah.
So here, like you can't treat someone who missed a payment for 2 days the same way you would treat this
Yeah.
someone who
Of
missed it
course.
for 2 years, right? So that is another one, and then there is all of the data that we collect, right? And when I say data, we're not only talking about the data that the customer gives us, but also the way the customer is behaving, right?
Yeah.
So one of actually the we can start it with the simplest things, which is if the customer came to the portal, clicked pay in full, and just decided last minute that he doesn't want to pay, right? That in
Okay.
my world, that is like pretty much similar to someone who added something to a basket and
Yeah.
now you want to engage with them
Sure.
a bit differently, right? So you would so the kind of emails, SMSs, messages, etc., or even the content of the call they would receive is going to be extremely differently, right?
Sure.
So yeah. Now, in terms of the reasons behind non-payment are actually very much similar to what we see in e-commerce and in
Yeah.
business in general. Like the reasons why,
Mm-hmm.
like they're almost like the stoppers in activation, right? Like when you're trying to increase your activation rate, you're like, okay, either the price is too expensive, either they didn't understand the product, either they don't have time for it, right? It's too complicated for them, right? And that's the same thing that would happen at that point in time, just with slightly different words, right? So I don't have the money right now. I'm going through something, etc., etc. And with that, you start to build the right journeys and the right retargeting
Fair
per se.
enough. So, one of the things we find extremely interesting across customer situations, especially like yours, where there's a lot of inferences you're drawing from the user's behavior, is this whole idea of derived attributes or inferred attributes. The way normally one would model data inside a platform like WebEngage is you have facts, which are whatever you know about a user. Sometimes you can apply calculations on top of it to say, okay, the days past due is X and the date was known. So you can calculate the bucket in which this is, let's say, 15 days, 15 to 30, 30 to 16, so on and so forth, because your subsequent engagement might change by the bucket that the user is in. Every time he crosses over to the next bucket, you might change the structure. So in the world of data models, the way in your ecosystem it will apply, from having factual data plus the sole inferred and derived attributes ecosystem, is this something that you've done a lot of development in? Because people who are trying to do this better would love to understand how do they make their own system more intelligent, because there's a fair bit of user behavior information that's available, and how and where can they really utilize it to change downstream engagement.
Actually, that was the biggest thing for us,
Mm-hmm.
especially before we've had our portal, right? Because the only
Right.
thing we had back then were what the customer is saying and how can we translate that into attributes, right?
Sure.
Um, I mean, thanks to this, we're very lucky to be in this day and age where AI makes
Sure.
this very simple, right? And with this one, we didn't need to build anything, right? We've relied
Okay.
heavily on like external tools that exist out there
Mm-hmm.
that would basically
Sure.
listen to the call, understand everything, and turn everything into binary, true, false,
Yeah. Mm.
kind of a thing. So, employed, unemployed, true, false, right? Like have a dispute, true, false. Now, summary of the dispute. Now, how can you turn that into something else, right?
Mm.
And what we do is that then we take those as just normal attributes, we turn those into normal attributes, and we deal with it. I wouldn't say it's
Right.
perfect. We haven't reached
Of course.
perfection yet, but with all of the
It's always
A/B
a journey.
testing, we're yeah,
Mm.
and also the toughest part in it is to understand what correlates and what doesn't, right? Because we can always,
Yeah.
on based on assumptions, create the fanciest journeys,
Yeah.
but what is the impact really? What's the ROI? So I think, I mean, especially for the debt collection bit, it's always about taking
Mm.
a step back, right? Like
Yeah.
if someone is saying, "Hey, I lost my job, I have no money," right? There's no attributes in the world that's going to predict that this person is going to be able to pay me anything this month, right? Like
Sure.
it's unless they're lying, right? Or that
Yeah. Yeah.
information is not true, but
Mm.
otherwise,
Mm.
so it's also, I would say, there's also magic in taking two steps back and thinking of the bigger picture, right? And not to fall to
Sure.
the paralysis of the analysis, which we often get to
Of
when we
course.
have a lot of data, right?
You mentioned the words impact and ROI, and the metrics, if I were to understand, will end up being the earlier definitions you gave in terms of how much did you collect, how fast did you collect, and there was a third line item here,
So
which is the
percentage
collection
of
rate,
recovery, the collection
percentage
rate,
recovery.
and then how much?
Hmm.
Yeah.
The impact and the ROI, is that measured in the same language, or how does that get measured?
So ROI is more of an internal metric that we
Mm-hmm.
use, which is, I mean, as an agency, we end up like we take a percentage, right? or a commission. So at the end of the day, we
Yeah.
need to make sure that we're not spending on the customer more than what we could potentially receive on them, if that makes sense, right? So that's where ROI comes in handy.
So the math of, you mentioned you also go after the long tail of small debts, which means the cost of what you're doing to recover that money has to also be efficient. Is that to do with the choice of channels and the intensity of communication, or is there more to optimizing cost in that world?
100%. No, it is. It's mostly about the choice of channels and the frequency, right? And just betting on
Hmm.
the right odds. So, and there you would want to be like extremely sensitive, like meaning you wouldn't want to call someone at a time where they could potentially answer the call and at the same time tell you call me back later, right?
Sure.
So things like that. So
Yeah.
it gets to even that level of detail.
What do you see as a nirvana state of engagement and automation in your world, in your nature of business, given the facts of the truth that we know today? I understand technology will also evolve and things might change, but given what you know today, what would be your definition of a perfect setup that does a great job in the way you expect it to?
So when it comes to what we're expecting in the future, is one of our second, like, and most recent and becoming most popular product as we go, which is
Hmm.
the white label bit, right? Which is
Okay.
instead of us as an agency like acting on behalf of the lender, actually the
Hmm.
lender would be able to leverage our technology to speak with their customers, right? um,
Hmm.
so I think that's generally where the company's been heading now. We've seen a lot of
So you
traction
become a
on that, I
SaaS
think.
platform. Is that largely how it gets created? Is this a SaaS
It
kind
is
of structure?
it's an enterprise SaaS though, right? So it has
Sure.
its own levels of customization, but
Got
that's,
it.
yeah, I would say that's mostly where things seem to be heading, and that's what the customers want is more. They don't want the middleman, right? And if you want to be true to our ethos as a technology company, it's actually
Right.
about removing that, right? But the approach we took is more of go with the market once now, and you might be able to convince the market otherwise in the future if you're able to prove something, right? Think of it in a world where we didn't even build the agency part, and the agency part did not, and they didn't see the success
Hmm.
of it. To
Right.
tell someone from collections only 3 years ago that an AI can actually do this better would
Hmm.
be a crazy claim that no
Yeah.
one, not only would not even buy, that no one would even give you a demo, right?
Entertain you.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so we had to do it the
So
other way.
you went ahead to solve the problem, get your hands dirty yourself, actually ran the business to understand the nuances, and now your product ends up using all those insights and it's available for somebody to just use as a product, not as a service. Is that the expectation to scale up? Because I mean, the agency has its own human limitation after a point to what extent it can scale up, but the SaaS has no such limitations and it can scale up substantially.
I believe that like the customer could benefit a lot from speaking directly with their lender, right? Again, all of the benefits of cutting the middleman with the technology bit,
Yeah, the
which I
information
think
is
will.
more, let's say, directly, the decision making could be more central. There's definitely merit. And in terms of your current scale of operation, is the product, which is the SaaS equivalent, larger part already, or you're heading in that
No,
direction
no.
where you still do services, but the SaaS is where it'll be in a year from now?
So the thing is, when the agency side, I think is not an easy one to beat as we speak.
Sure,
So we're handling a portfolio of over $300 million in like almost a year, right? So
sure,
um, it and as you know, like SaaS companies take time to build. So that's more like our technology arm that
sure.
would be there, and yeah.
Hmm.
So no, it's fastly growing, but
Hmm.
the agency model is definitely
For now, it's still, wearing the agency hat, and it's good business. I would imagine 300 million is not a small number to raise, but the technology story eventually ends up being more powerful from a potential upside and scale lens, is what I'm understanding. Now that you've told me that you headed the SaaS route yourself, the whole build versus buy components as far as technology partners are concerned, How do you see the handshake and sophistication of that play out over time? Because, of course, you will always have a technology team, but at the same time, you'll always have 20 other priorities as well.
Exactly. I mean, that was one of the biggest questions we always asked. I mean, we've asked ourselves from day one, and we always ask ourselves this question. And we
Sure.
usually ask ourselves another question to get the best answer, which is, okay, am I going to be able to achieve something better by doing that? Okay, so is
Okay.
it worth it? Or am I just getting my team busy, right? If someone else can do this job better than I can, then I would much rather leave it to them and focus a bit more on my core business, right?
Sure.
So that's generally how we think about it philosophically, at least. The only times we ended up having to build something was simply when we could not find an alternative, right? And I think that I personally believe that's the best way to do it. Obviously, when you're relying on third-party tools, there are a lot of things that you would wish that they're there, etc. And you can always compensate for them and solve for them in different ways, right? But you would, I believe, if someone can do something better than I can, then let them do it, and let me, like that's at
Fair
least
enough.
my philosophy when it comes to this. Yeah.
And my hunch is the for this application is global because lending is global, collections as a topic is global. If you're handling a language as complex as Arabic, you might just find it not particularly complex to handle more languages. So, from a choice of markets, is it a GTM or happens to be a geographic current location that you are doing this in UAE, or is the market elsewhere more competitive, or what's your lens there yet?
So when it comes to our ambitions, when it comes to geographical expansion, I mean, sky's the limit. I guess you're right, because it is a problem that exists globally, and you can easily move it from one place to the other. We would want to though first focus on the region. I mean, the region is big enough um, to start with at the moment. We've launched the UAE, obviously, and we've been there for the last 2 years. We're launching KSA as we speak, and we're starting the work there. So, and I think soon enough, like the rest of the GCC would be following through, and then we'd start to look at the Levant and North Africa as well.
Fair enough. So that geography path remains. Now, tell me something. While the brands and the lenders have seen increasing, let's say, quality of experience for the borrowers when they switch to workflows like yours, how has the borrower behavior shaped? Now, instead of normally being called by a potentially aggressive human, I'm being reached out to on multiple channels by a system. And if I'm also speaking on the call, I'm talking to an AI voice, which is not human. Is the behavior noticeably different? Do you see people being more, let's say, responsive, not as responsive? And do they see this as more intrusive? What is the consumer reaction?
I mean, so far it's been positive. Our CSAT has been at 4.5, which, to be honest, I struggled to get that for my other consumer first businesses before.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think it's more about the beauty. I would say, as I would flip it, and I would say the beauty of systems is that they listen to you, and there is a a predictable action that comes after, and something happens almost immediately, right? Meaning, someone said, I lost my job. Okay, can you please send, like, then the AI would reply, for example, can you please send me the proof of your unemployment? The person sends them the proof of unemployment. It scans. As soon as it checks out, it has some pre-approvals. It goes, it approves the settlement or the discount or whatever it is, right? This
Okay.
process used to, and I see it even because we have a human side of the agency, right? With humans, I would say it takes
Sure.
somewhere between 24 to 48 hours. This entire thing, the journey that I told you now, happened in like anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes, right?
Okay.
So there is a gratification towards that. I think the other thing is, again, it's not about mimicking only what is happening offline and trying to take that online. It's actually about going back to the first principle and to switch the problem and to find a solution that is more suitable. Meaning, if the biggest issue that we used to see before is that there was a lot of friction in someone getting an approval, and there are options that the bank is more than happy to accept. It's just that they're like almost like hidden like behind questions, behind questions, behind questions. Once you actually remove that friction and you make that more visible, so as soon as you actually validate on the portal, you get the options of picking the
Mm-hmm.
amount of installments you want to pay in, what kind of settlement can you pay. You click next, it's approved or rejected, you pay, it's done, right? I think it's a completely different way of looking at it. So going back to your question, would they prefer that over the tradition? Do I believe that customers prefer that over the traditional
Mm-hmm.
experience? 100%. Are there
Sure.
concerns over security, etc.? The thing is, so those were the toughest questions we've had to answer. Obviously, like,
Mm-hmm.
am I talking to an AI? What does this AI know about me? What is happening, right? And therefore, we provided enough material to actually help people understand how we're using their data and how their data is being processed.
Fascinating. So there is a certain degree of process automation slash intelligence involved, even though it might not be generative AI level artificial intelligence. But the whole efficiency in the entire user experience is where you've applied the growth hacker's mind and understood those funnels and steps, and where there was friction, removed all of it, where there were layers of questions, again, demystified and simplified. So it's not just about the whole collection protocol, but also the whole user experience throughout the payments or non-payments or delayed payments process, which has taken a very clinical approach with respect to improved efficiencies. I think that's what I'm hearing from you. What's very fascinating, Mohammed, here is the approach you've taken to take a typically complicated, messy process and actually break it down and simplify it and improve the overall performance. I would imagine this is possible and replicable in other situations and other businesses as well. For somebody trying to attempt this in their world, what would be your top few learnings to say that, okay, this is how you can simplify, uncomplicate, even use some degree of machine learning, some degree of AI? What is the philosophical framework, since you use that term, that you would recommend to somebody in that direction?
I mean, I would say the first thing was, again, trying to solve the problem from a first principle approach, right? So take a complicated something that already exists for thousands of years. It's happening offline. It never changed, right? Take 50 steps back, look at it from a distance, try to understand the problem at its core, right? And try to
Hmm.
dismantle it, and don't try to solve it the way I would say, don't try to solve it the way it's currently being solved, right?
Hmm.
You will need to, because you would be setting yourself up to somewhat failure. Like if I have tried to mimic, like if I have tried to say, okay, I want to use the AI agents to replace completely the human agents, it wouldn't have ever
Hmm.
succeeded, right? The way we had to think about it is, how do channels hand over to each other at the right point
Right.
in time to build a dialogue, not just a conversation, right?
Hmm.
So I would say, yeah, that would be the, yeah, that would be like the general framework I would recommend anyone to look into. And there are a lot of problems, like a lot of things are tedious, manual, they could be done better.
Yeah.
Just look at the problem as if it's happening for the first time and ask yourself, what would it take
Hmm.
for me to, like, what, how would I resolve this in 2025, and forget about everything that existed before that.
So start from a bit of a clean slate. What have you learned about the subject of collections and the world of borrowers and the world of lenders? How much did you know as a starting point hypothesis when you started out on this journey?
Right. I mean, I did study accounting and finance, so I have a bit of an understanding on what's happening. But I would say the biggest piece, or the most important piece, was a lot of things that happened to some of my really close family members and people that I deeply know. I saw what happened with them.
Hmm.
Like, and I saw the journey. I was not. great.
The experience
Great.
was problematic.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. That's why probably I also like for us the ethos, the company ethos is very clear on empathy, because we do see the brother, we do see the father, we do see the friend in each and every person, right? And that to me at least is a yeah, is very close to home.
Very fascinating. And that's the part I was curious about, that how much of this came from some degree of direct or indirect experience of felt pain, as a term which we use often in the startup ecosystem, that things that you have personally experienced, you have an intuitive sense of judgment on what to build and how to build, compared to things where you don't have any real first-hand experience, because then you're always collecting user insights in interviews and trying to synthesize them into your decisions.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of it did. It at least it shed light on a problem that
mhm.
I wouldn't have actually thought about. I just believe that like things happen in our lives for a reason, right? And like you witness certain people with
You
certain
connected
things.
dots.
Yeah, exactly. There,
And you
so I
connected
think.
dots looking backwards, of course.
Oh, 100%. I don't think there's a day I woke up and I felt like, okay, like this was not my calling. I know it's such a weird way to say like, oh, my calling was debt collection, right? But I guess,
Yeah, well,
uh,
if it is touching that many lives in an empathetic fashion, why not? And I will take a little bit on your 0 to 1 journey. Now, of course, you've scaled up a lot more beyond that. But the first days, in terms of the first MVP and the first build, the first sale, was like an agency who's going to deliver outcomes, and which is kind of the same model that you're now at. But was that how it played out? The efficiency in the process is all evolving, but you sold to a brand who's a lender, like an agency who will do a better job at collections.
yeah, I mean, so that's the thing. We didn't start it out with an agency that would do better collections as much as, hey, we actually started it with the empathy part and we started it with the brand
Hmm.
image, right? We went to
Okay.
a lender at the time that had an issue with collections, but at the same time, they wouldn't give their portfolio to the traditional debt collection agencies because they do care
Hmm.
about their brand. So it felt like it was the
Okay.
perfect marriage almost. They were a very tech heavy lender. Their entire journey end to end is happening online. So we were like, listen, you're acquiring users online, you're engaging with them online. It makes no sense anyway for you to collect with them somehow offline or over the phone or something, right?
Yeah.
So that I would say is how like yeah, like we were lucky that that was the way things started, and then from there we
Hmm.
started to move towards working with BNPLs and then banks, and yeah, things started to shift pretty quickly from there.
So the regulatory side of things as well as the brand side of things became the early drivers, and then I'm assuming your performance also kept up to speed. So for the brand as a lender, it's a win-win to leverage the ClearGrid platform.
Yep. I mean, when we
Awesome.
first started, I don't think we were even thinking because, like, you wouldn't be as sure about your performance, right? You're trying to invent something that, like,
Sure.
there is no template for it, right? And often, just generally, like, while building something, you get to a bit of an imposter syndrome slash, like, am I even doing the right thing? Am I like,
Yeah.
So I don't think we entered it with that confidence. I think that actually came once we
Hmm.
started to see the performance and when we started to see that like the numbers are doubling month over month, we have a very scientific way to understand what's going on, how we know at least how to improve it. We started to improve it. We started to perform better than the traditional like experience, and yeah.
So safe to say empathy is good for business as well, because if you let them, people don't want to not pay. It's just that they need some degree of support, assistance, maybe for the period.
I mean, the thing is, like, empathy in this context is anyway a different way of saying understand your customers, right?
Yeah.
That's like so it's not a it's not a humanitarian term as much as actually a business way, like a
It's not
business
more from
thing, right?
morality coming from insights. Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying that as like the advice. Obviously, for us, it was again driven
The
by the
growth
personal
marketer,
experiences we had to go through. So empathy was a very big
of
one,
course.
but I would say it was a
Hmm.
reason behind the success because we just were lucky to have sat down some time to understand our customers a bit better, understand their pain points,
Yeah.
and therefore the solution would become a no-brainer.
Fair enough. And I mean, in some sense, for anybody trying to improve collections as an experience, both from a user experience lens, maybe call it more empathetic or more insightful, in some sense, it's the same thing, would be able to pick a bunch of these lessons from your playbook to improve their own collections flow. If they're not looking to use ClearGrid already and trying to do something separately or are in a market which you don't currently service, those are the lessons that I'll apply.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say if you start with empathy, you'll get all the answers. Honestly, if you start with understanding your customer,
Hmm.
that like that is the true magic is not in the AI, and it's not in the how many SMSs you send. It's actually because
Sure.
you can send 10,000 SMSs and emails and messages and whatever that are communicating the wrong thing. If you don't understand who you're talking to
Hmm.
and what's their problem, then might as well just save the cost
Yeah.
and
You and Mohammed were heading towards the last leg of the conversation. I think a couple of things I'd love to maybe sharpen a little bit attention on is what are your, let's say, metrics that matter that you frequently watch as a co-founder? That okay, these are the few things that reflect the overall health of the business and is something that I watch pretty much on a daily basis.
I mean, besides like all of the things we're always looking at, such as like the revenue and the gross margin and like the net profit, etc. I think the biggest ones when it comes to this is are we are we doing a better job every single day, right? Are we recovering more?
Hmm.
Are we able to reach out to more people? What's our reachability like? What is our deliverability like? Actually, deliverability, then reachability. Then with that, what's our connectivity
Sure.
ratio like? And then with that
Hmm.
is the recovery. So that's kind of the funnel. Actually, what I did is that I took the
Understood.
growth hacking funnel and I just
This
found
is the
the
fun. Yeah.
what's equivalent in that collection, just because that's what we were comfortable with, right? Um, I look at CSAT very seriously, by the way. I like
Okay.
to see that customers, and generally we do look at CSAT of those who have paid. So when somebody pays, they get a survey.
Of course.
We understand what was their experience like. And that one is very important to me because I don't only want to know that people paid, but I want to know that they were treated right
If they were
across the
happy through
journey.
that. All right. I think on a lighter note, tell me something that surprised you through the last course of insights that you saw emerge from your own data. What was the quirky surprise that you discovered?
Oh.
I'm
I
sure
feel
there's
like we've
some,
seen a
right?
lot of yeah. There is a lot of stories there. Just trying to think of the ones I can probably say, and likely the ones I can
Nothing
probably say
gained,
are
right?
not the really cool ones. But I would say like one of the biggest ones when like people um, when people meet sometimes and love happens and when love happens someone ends up giving someone their credit card and then they break up and those kinds of stories I don't like I obviously understand what the person's going through and it is a decision they made at the end of the
Sure.
day, so they have yeah but I find those to be very interesting just in general, so that those kinds of stories are there, a bit more on like kids like using their parents
Hmm.
phones and like getting like a PS5 and then like we spend like hours and hours backs and forth on like, I've never used this card before. I've only had it on the side, and till we understand what's the reason, right? So things like that, right? Yeah, I mean, we see a lot. We hear a lot. Yeah.
And all these conversations are also being summarized by AI, which means at a macro level, you see a lot of what's going on in the trend. You also abstract to that layer? I mean, beyond a customer's conversation, does that abstract at a broader level for you?
Something that's very important that I want to highlight, we do also have human agents that are there in between. And to be fair, most of those stories, I get them like, like as like I'm walking in the hallway and I'm hearing something and I'm like, oh, what's happening, and that kind of a thing.
Sure.
So because like AI, I mean, sure, it can do that, but we're not using it for that, if that makes sense. We just use it to understand disputes, and if there's something it can send. And mostly the way we handle disputes from AI at the moment is that we do handle it to a human, just because it's sensitive information. Mostly something must have happened. You don't want to frustrate the customer. AI is good, it's not there yet.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think at least hopefully you're not doing those press one for this, press two for this kind of stuff anymore, which unfortunately still a large number of brands still continue to do. And AI and voice has evolved, and I think that's a part you've also developed. But I like the fact that you're making this into a SaaS, and that will become a power available to all lenders to do a better job and hopefully a more insightful and empathetic job at collections. Thank you so much, Mohammed. A lovely conversation. I learned a lot today.
If you like what you see, if you like what you hear, you want us to host more such conversations, you have guests that you want to recommend, do write to us at sormpodcast@webengage.com. You can like and subscribe to this channel to always get the latest that's happening in the world of retention marketing. You can also recommend us guests and give us more feedback on sormpodcast@webengage.com.